All right, continuing on with our review, we'll be doing problems 8 through 16 right here in this section. All right, problem 8, you got back-to-back parentheses, which means we have to multiply. Well, here, since I've got two terms and two terms, binomials, we have to distribute the negative 8 times both terms and the and the 6i times both terms. So negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. Negative 8 times negative I, positive 8i. And then you've got 6i times negative 1, so negative 6i. And then 6i times negative I, negative 6. And then don't forget I times I is I squared. All right, so again, back to our I rules. I squareds need to turn into negative 1s. Okay, so when I've got negative 6 times a negative 1, this actually turns into a positive 6 here at the end. So combining like terms, remember your constants always go in the front, your i's always go at the end. So my constants, I've got an 8 plus 6, which gives me 14. And then my I terms, positive 8i minus 6, 8 minus 6 is positive 2i. Constants in the front, i's in the back. Number 9, here's a subtraction. So I'm actually going to distribute the negative to this second parenthesis. So I've got a 2 plus 4i. We're not messing with that first parenthesis. Negative times negative 5 turns them into a positive 5. Negative times I turns them into negative I. Combine like terms, constants first. 2 plus 5 gives us a 7. Now the I terms, positive 4i minus 1 gives me positive 3i's. 10. Again, we got back-to-back parentheses, so we're distributing again. Negative 1 times negative 2, positive 2. Negative 1 times I is negative 1i. Negative 8i times negative 2, negative 8 times negative 2, positive 16i. And then negative 8i times I is negative 8. I and I again is I squared. Once again, I rules. I squared turns into a negative 1. So negative 8 times negative 1, this whole dude at the end turns into a positive 8. Now we can combine the like terms. Constants first, 2 plus 8 gives us a 10. And then i's, negative 1 plus 16, which is going to be positive 15 i's. 11, we are adding the two parentheses together. Anytime you're adding the two parentheses, you can just get rid of the parentheses. They're really not necessary. So I've got a 2 plus 3i, because if I distribute a positive, positive times 1 is positive 1, and positive times negative 2i is still negative 2i. So a rule of thumb, if you have an addition sign in between the two parentheses, we don't even need the parentheses. We just get rid of them, combine the like terms. Constants first, 2 plus 1 gives us 3. Now the i's. 3i minus 2i is positive 1i. And the 1's really not necessary. You can put it if you want, but it's not necessary. Subtraction, in between the parentheses, we are going to have to distribute this negative sign. So I've got a negative 4 minus 7i in the front. That parenthesis won't change. Negative times negative 4 turns him into a positive 4. Negative times 7i, negative 7i. Combine like terms. Negative 4 plus 4, those actually cancel. Now combine your i's. Negative 7 minus 7 more. Negative 7 minus 7 more is negative 14 i's. All right, now we are dividing. So we have to rationalize our denominator. Remember our rule, we do not need any i's in the denominator. So we're going to identify the group with parentheses. Now this one has two terms. Okay, this one has two terms. So remember what we multiply by. If we have two terms, we multiply by what we call the conjugate. Again, the conjugate only means to change the sign in the middle. So instead of 8 plus 4i, we're going to multiply by 8 minus 4i. And if you multiply your denominator, 8 minus 4i, you got to multiply your numerator as well, times 8 minus 4i. All right, so let's distribute the numerator. 9 times 8, 72. 9 times negative 4i, negative 36i's. Okay. Remember your conjugate, there's a shortcut. Okay, your two middle terms are going to cancel, so the shortcut is just multiply the first term times the first term, so 8 times 8, 64, and the last term times the last term. 4i times negative 4i is negative 16, I squared. Okay, so again, our I rules. This I squared actually turns into a negative 1. So negative 16 times negative 1, this whole thing here turns into a positive 16. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to rewrite what I've got. I've got constant first, so 72 minus 36i. That's okay. My denominator, I've got 64 plus 16, which gives me 80. Okay, so we need to reduce this. All right, we need to reduce this, or your teachers are telling you to split this up, two separate fractions. You've got 72 over 80 minus 36i over 80. And again, we need to reduce these fractions. So the nice thing about your calculator, it'll do it for you. 72 divided by 80 gives you a decimal. If you go math, enter, enter, it'll reduce it for you. So this reduces to 9 over 10 minus, let's see. Okay, now reduce this one. 36 divided by 80 gives you a decimal. Math, enter, enter, puts it back into a fraction. So that one's going to be 9 over 20. And don't forget, your I was up top in the numerator, so he still needs to be there. Okay, so that is completely simplified there. Go to the back, 14. 14 again is a conjugate problem. Identify the group. We're going to multiply by the conjugate. Remember, the conjugate only means to change the sign in the middle. So we've got a negative 3 in the front still, but this is going to be a minus 6i. And the numerator as well, negative 3 minus 6i. All right, so when we distribute the numerator, 3i times negative 3, negative 9i. 3i times negative 6i is going to be negative 18i squared. Remember our shortcut rule for the conjugate. We can multiply the first times the first, so negative 3 times negative 3, positive 9. And then the last times the last. 6i times negative 6i, negative 36i squared. Again, I rules. I squared turns to a negative 1, so negative 18 times negative 1, this actually turns into a positive 18. I squared down here turns to a negative 1, so negative 36 times negative 1, this whole thing turns into a positive 36. All right, I'm going to come down here and rewrite this. Constant in the front, so I'm going to put my positive 18 in the front. This minus 9i, we're going to move it to the back. We always want our constant first. The I term goes in the back. And then in my denominator, I've got 9 plus 36, which is going to give me a 45. Okay, so again, if we split that up, you've got 18 over 45. We'll try to reduce that here in a minute. Minus 9i over 45. So we wanted to reduce both of those fractions. Again, if you put in your calculator 18 over 45, you're going to get a decimal. And when you go math, enter, enter, you get 2 over 5. Minus 9 over 45 reduces to 1 over 5. So 1i over 5. You can put the 1 in front of the I if you want to, but it's not necessary. So that's an acceptable answer. Or if you combined it, you could have 2 minus I for your numerator. Since your denominators are the same, they're both 5s, you could just put it all over one denominator. Either way there is fine. 15 and 16 are a little bit different. We have i's in the denominator, which we need to get rid of. However, we only have one term. If we only have one term, we're going to multiply I over I. So the numerator, 3 times I is 3i. The denominator, 7i times I is 7i squared. And again, I squared turns to negative 1. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. We don't want our negative in our denominator. Okay, so we want to change the sign. So if we change negative 7 to a positive 7, we got to change our positive 3i to a negative 3i. Negative 3i over 7. And 16 again, identify the group here. We've got a single term in the denominator, so we're going to multiply I over I. So I'm going to distribute negative 10 times I, negative 10i. I times I is positive I squared. And then 2i times I is 2i squared. Again, I squared here turns to a negative 1. So this is going to be plus negative 1. So it's just going to be negative 1. This I squared turns to a negative 1. So that whole thing is going to turn into a negative 2. So I've got negative 1 minus 10i over negative 2. Again, if we split that up, I'm running out of time. You can see, split that up, reduce the fraction.